stronger European Union, which is interesting. So I'm just going to put that on the table and let you guys tell me what you think about that.
You know, I think what's happening is that within Europe, we have two factions. We have the Atlanticists and the Eurasianists. And I think it's a struggle between these two ideological blocks. The Atlanticists want to have eventually a federation with the United States. The idea here is to have Europe federated with the United States and Canada, and to have a bigger federation, and to organize it according to the United States rules, laws, and regulations of basically no regulation, the GMO food, and so on and so forth. Well, there is the opposition to this, and it's found in France and perhaps also in Germany, is the Eurasianist side. They, for instance, follow the directives of Charles de Gaulle, who said that he wanted Europe from Lisbon to the Urals. In other words, Europe that includes also Russia. And so at this point of time, I think the Atlanticist faction is losing out, and this is why this faction is creating all of this. So it's putting pressure, especially on Germany, because Germany will be the most affected by the refugees. And in fact, most of these refugees have gone to Germany, more than 1 million of them. Of course, compared to the total German population, which is about 80 million, it's not a whole lot. But if, as Sibel says, there are many suspicious individuals within them, we may expect a lot of instability. And as we know, in today's climate of fear, it's enough for one bomb to go off in a big city of 5 million people and for the whole city to be shut down. So the reaction is disproportionate to the event. This is why I think we may see even more attacks in Germany and also in France. We also have to take into consideration that the French elections, the French presidential elections are coming up. And this goes well with Putin canceling visit to France at the last minute just yesterday, because I guess Hollande did not want to meet with him. The reason is Putin is going to support Sarkozy. Can you believe that? Sarkozy, the ultimate Atlanticist, has now gone on to the other side because he does come out of this Gaullist heritage. And so Hollande's not meeting Putin is actually connected to the elections coming up in France. So we have to look at all these different levels and, of course, express our ultimate compassion for the refugees, for the actual refugees, people who lost their homes all over the Middle East and North Africa and Central Asia. These are people who are being manipulated, who are used as weapons, and this is tragic, and this has to stop.
Well, there is one pretty immediate consequence of this that we are able to observe, and especially when you speak with people who live, let's say people in Greece, especially the areas in Greece that are mostly affected by these refugee crises. And when you speak with the people there, with the Greeks, they tell you one of the immediate consequences of this has been giving birth to the rise of extreme right and the extreme left that they say we had not observed in decades and decades. So what happened, for example, if we were to present Lesbos as example, initially everybody on the island, they were generous, wonderful, warm people, and they rushed to help and bring in these refugees and take care of them and give them clothes. This is, they said, before any of the NGOs started coming into their island, and they said it's amazing. So many of these NGOs that they said they are observing are bogus. They have been just quickly created to come and blend in with some of the, better known NGOs. But regardless, what it caused in this particular island was immediately with the alternatives, the pseudo-alternative media, mainstream media playing it, their bloodline, their lifeline was tourism. It ended their tourism. So you had all these British tour operators, operating agencies, other European, German, French, they all canceled their reservations in the hotels there. I would say over 80% of the people there, their livelihood depends on tourism. And most of them work very hard, 7 days a week, almost 24/7 for 5 months. And then they don't have jobs for 5-6 months. They have to save enough to live off of that. So with their tourism being completely stopped, thanks to the media embellishing and putting lies after lies about this excruciating situation and all this horrific scenery in Lesbos, which was never the case. We were all over the place, okay? Their livelihood got lost. So you got a large segment unemployed. Also seeing some of the other consequences of these refugees and the camp there. So they started feeling resentful. They were being they had resentment. They started saying, and their kids, okay, I'm talking about teenagers, being filled with hatred, saying because of these darn Muslims, because of these darn refugees, now we can't eat, we don't have bread on the table, right? And as this started happening, this resentment, mysterious ultra-right, neo-Nazi, whatever you want to call them, they started coming in and putting fuel in this fire that was being created with the resentment and recruiting that segment with resentment into what we dub as extreme right, the neo-Nazi, whatever you want to call them. Then you have the island divided, which they never had in their history to this degree. The people we are talking with, they're saying this is just, we've never experienced anything like this. Now there's a feud, there's a war between two segments that didn't exist. The ultra left, the ultra liberal, and the ultra right. And it all started and developed and escalated with this refugee crisis. Well, we see the same phenomena all over Europe. We see the same rise of the extreme right and extreme left in Germany. We are seeing it everywhere, in the Balkans even, to a certain degree we see this. And that, to me, also goes into this tactic of divide and conquer with the establishment. In fact, one of the Greeks on the island said, basically, they are replicating the situation in your country. This is being the USA with Trump and Hillary Clinton, in these small little places, countries all over Europe, between the two segments. So we are experiencing the same thing you have put in place in your country. And when you start thinking about that, and this consequence, again, it goes into the Soros modus operandi, divide and conquer, pit the blacks against the white, pit the Jews against the Muslim, pit the Christians against. That is what we are seeing as the result of these artificially or synthetically created so-called refugee crisis. And we have to look at the ultimate beneficiaries. But I tell you what, even with these refugee crises, without the mainstream media and the pseudo-alternatives playing their role, let's say in the case of this Greek island, by putting lies and embellishing the stuff at what's happening on the island, that those agendas would not be served. What is enabling the goal, the objectives, for the objectives to be accomplished, is the mainstream media and pseudo-alternative media playing their very important role. How they are writing it day after day, whether there is some incident that has never occurred or is a small little incident that has been contained, but they embellish and they exaggerate. They are inducing this feeling of hatred between the population, between different segments. This is why when we were talking with some of the Turkish people, they kept saying, you see, we told you since 9/11 is all about restarting crusaders. Because by doing this, they want to create this hatred towards Muslim and Islam. And this is what George Bush wanted. This is what Soros has always wanted, so that they can get the Europe also together with US on board in all these attacks that we are seeing all over the Middle East. And we are going to see these attacks in some of the stands, because we're going to have similar situation with Chechens. It has been placed on pause, but it's going to start again. So that is one of the immediate consequences that you right away see in Europe, especially in Greece. And that is the extreme, very rapid speedy rise of extreme right and extreme left.
Well, those are great points there, and you're absolutely right about the extremes on both sides being fomented and culminating. And like the locals that we were speaking with there described themselves as being caught in the middle, and each side was just as bad as the other. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, one side's better than the other. But I think it's important to remember also, like Professor Kovacevic stated earlier, that the people at the end of the day are the victims, whether it's the refugees, whether it's the locals. And this is all being caused, or it's all because of ISIS. This all of these calamities that are taking place, all of these humanitarian crises that are taking place. It's all because what? Because ISIS is trying to destabilize, overthrow Assad. I mean, and it's all war-torn countries that the West is in there tearing it up. I mean, I've even read reports over the last year stating how ISIS mercenaries were claiming that they had infiltrated their own jihadis in with the refugees, and they've, thousands in Europe and everything like that. And that they even predicted that this refugee crisis was going to take place before it happened. So, I mean, in my own opinion, if ISIS was as real as the mainstream media portrays them to be, we could have eliminated them and wiped them off the face of the planet a long time ago. And I don't think that these guys are able to orchestrate this massive migration movement right now against all of these developed countries with their massive surveillance programs and their massive police states and militaries, and we're just sitting here like it's ISIS, they're coming to get us. So very, very interesting points that all three of you have made today here. I really enjoy our conversation, and it's still an ongoing issue that's still affecting millions and millions of people, and it's going to continue to do it. And I think, Sibel, you nailed it on the head with the divide and conquer tactic, and it's happening on so many different levels. I'd like to ask each one of you if you have any final points.
My final point is that we have to look closely at the relations between Turkey and Russia. We have to understand the mind of Erdogan, because he is still trying to play with both sides. I mentioned in one of the last podcasts that Turkey had a real opportunity to stop expansion of NATO. The expansion of NATO is one of the biggest critiques that Russia has had since the end of the Cold War. And Turkey could have stopped it by not ratifying the accession protocol with Montenegro. And they did not. The Turkish parliament ratified the accession agreement with Montenegro, which means that Turkey is not going to leave NATO anytime soon, which means that the deals that signed with Putin may not work out in the end. But this puts Turkey as a country in a very difficult situation, because I think the West and the East will try to put a lot of pressure on it, and perhaps even try to cause huge disturbances in Turkey. So I think it's time for Erdogan to choose sides. That is, to move from the West to the East and accept a strategic alliance with Putin and the Chinese, because otherwise he is going to be destroyed and Turkey may be in big trouble coming up.
Let me reinforce what I think the point that Sibel was making there so forcefully and so rightly is that this is about divide and conquer. So from the internal European perspective, you have the atomization of society with people being pushed, neighbors being pulled apart and put on different sides of this. And it enters into a globalist versus nationalist dialectic. And, well, the globalists ultimately win that dialectic because the logic of the situation dictates that ultimately once you atomize the population, then everyone can squabble with each other and they may be able to form their little nationalist cliques, but those cliques are going to have to collaborate in the European Union. It is going to be scooped